Yo, Sarge, how's it going? It's Gilmer here. Yeah. Was that his name? You know? Gomer was his name. Gomer Pyle. Yeah, Gomer Pyle. The guy who was always answering Sarge. You know, remember those old 1970s kind of shows? Hey, look. This guy actually has a license plate that says Ice Walk, Discover Banff Tours. He's got a really cool car. I wonder how much extra petrol this car actually eats up on the highway. Yeah, I wonder about this. Well, this is a national park. It's totally cool. I think it's great advertising, and you know what? If I was Prime Minister, I would definitely work more on making Banff National Park. The areas that are already established and zoned for commercial development. I would actually move all the housing in Banff National Park into Canmore. And I push the industrial compound in Banff National Park, I'd push that into Canmore too. And now to make the industrial compound a parking lot, and the downtown core area would be more of a theme park. More entertainment, less hectic shopping for last minute tourism. Gifts to take along with you for $12.50. Some really good times for everyone that comes to Canada. And big animals, stuff like Disney World, right? Really, all Western Canada. Calgary's for landmass, Calgary's like the biggest city, and we have this little theme park that's nothing, right? And this doesn't really have anything to do with the environment or anything like that as well. But entertainment has always been, Banff has to compete with huge competitors out there that are warmer, more tropical. We have to get really creative here because the park's empty, a larger percentage of the year, and the numbers have been flat-lined here. And investors really don't have anything special to look for if they're looking at a 40-year picture. Because in 40 years, there's no more oil, right? Plain and simple. And there's no more oil. There's no more tourism. And all these jobs, all these people, they would all have to leave this area, or they have to adapt and learn how to live and farm in this area like the early settlers. Yeah. This gentleman, he's a friend of mine, and he owns Blue Canoe. And we're moving on to the documentary now. YouTube gives me about 15 minutes. But as we walk over here, I'm going to walk right through here. Yeah, I thought it was appropriate to call this documentary The Blue Canoe because we're looking at the spring melt, the beginnings of the spring melt in the Canadian Rockies. And the Canadian Rockies is the home of one of two tertiary continental divides, right? And that's what it is. We have the Canadian Rockies feeds three oceans, right? And feeding three oceans is the water's a very important asset and a very important resource for Canada. 75% of the water consumed in North America actually comes from Canada. And the reason why I'm getting into the water is this is the number one resource we have to learn how to manage the most because we're running out of it. And we're doing things that are very harmful to our water assets here in Canada. One of the huge things, the largest things I should say, is the using 3 times as much water than as how much crude oil we actually get out of the tar sands. And then I think we use twice as much natural gas than we actually get out of the tar sands. These are true stats. There's a documentary out there that was put together by the creator of Manufactured Landscapes, and that documentary is called Petropolis. And that's where these stats actually come from. I generally watch these documentaries several times. Some of them I actually purchase to own, so I can keep these stats. And to go look online in libraries and stuff like this to put together my information for my documentaries. But my documentaries only have one purpose only, and that's to show how an independent individual like myself, living in Canada, being a business owner for 15 years, and looking at the sustainability of my business in a national park that attracts the world, the jet set world, I should say, to come here. And how that jet set world is going to have more difficulty coming here all the time. But moving back to the water that flows out of this national park, the first national park in Canada, and the most beautiful and the most amazing national park in the world. This water is it's a very troubled place for us Canadians. A lot of Canadians don't know, and then a lot of Canadians do know, that 80% of what makes the brain what it is water. And the quality of the water sitting in the brain really has to do with the quality of the individual you're dealing with, right? Of course, if you've been out drinking all night long, or even eating the wrong type of food for years on end, of course, the quality, and not getting enough water, but say if you're dehydrated completely, or your colon is dehydrated, of course the quality of the water in your brain is not going to allow your brain to function at full capacity. When we lose oil, we lose the work of 12 men per barrel. Yes, a barrel of oil, which only 2/3 of the barrel of oil that we pull out of the ground is actually used and refined. The rest of the other third, the remaining third, is actually turned to waste. And how it works out is, it's very plain and simple, is that 2/3 of a barrel of oil does the work of 12 men working full time for a year. When Canadians lose those working men, those invisible working men that power our cars and power our jet set lifestyles and our urban lifestyles, when we lose those men, we are going to change significantly as Canadians. They say that, I saw recently on a documentary on CBC that about 80% of Canadians consider themselves out of shape, not very athletic. Wish they could lose a couple pounds. Without oil driving the planet, and seeing that the planet can only support, without fossil fuels, about 1 billion people, and seeing that we're a world of almost 7 billion people as I speak on this documentary, we have to realize this water is a huge place, right? And the oil that powers us through the water of Canada is a huge place. Now, moving forward here, and going back to the water again, because beyond oil itself, water is Canada's most valuable resource. It's a huge place. It's more expensive than it is to buy a barrel, a liter of gas. Yes, it's more expensive. So moving on here, why is water so important to me? 80% of the brain is water. That's one thing. Like this gentleman over here, he's fishing in the river here. He's totally fishing in the river. You can't eat the fish in the river. Reason being is that in the last 50-odd years or so, humanity, has dumped over 50,000 chemicals into the water and never done a test. Yeah, it's a true thing. We don't even know what the parts per million are. All I know is the cancers and the tumors and the problems that we find in our own bodies are also found in the organs and fats of mammals swimming in the St. Lawrence Seaway. Beluga whales and killer whales and dolphins and which are technically part of the whale family. These mammals, they're suffering from the same kind of cancers, and there's no one treating them out there. These animals are sick, and when we reflect, we'll go over quite quickly over to Japan, who just had a nuclear meltdown from an earthquake, and they built the nuclear reactors on the coastline. they built them on a fault that sees about, who knows, 20 earthquakes a day, maybe 15 earthquakes a day. And these are, we're growing with our need for energy faster than we're learning about what the earth can actually do. But moving forward here, we only have about four minutes left here. Back to the water and talking about the nuclear meltdown over Japan. We hear all about the impact on the people, but we don't hear about the impact on the animals and the insects and all the other living, working, breathing beings that power the earth. And why I'm talking about oil and why am I talking about water is going back to my responsibility to this country and my responsibility as a son to his mother. My mother, when I came back to Canada in 1990, that very same year, my mother went into the hospital. I had already arrived in Canada, and my mother went into the hospital for 26 hours to have an acoustic neuroma removed from her skull, removed from her brain. And this is a tumor. It was intertwined around her, her neck, and it was all over her brain. It took them 26 hours, and the surgery was horrific. It was beyond horrific. So part of the reasons why I am running for Prime Minister is personal reasons, but it's also the responsibility for other Canadians that on the day, March 29th, when my mother went in that hospital and talked to the doctor for the first time ever, a doctor said to her, "We should never really drink tap water." And I had an environmental list of a girlfriend who was top in her class at the University of Calgary. And she was working at the field station in Kananaskis. And she said, yeah, the pollution reading is pretty good. The pollution readings are pretty good in the Canadian Rockies. And I asked her, what about the chemical ratings? And she pretty much told me we don't even have budgets to start testing for that stuff. So water is it's something that feeds all of us. There's so many life forms in the Canadian Rockies that actually really require water. Every living, breathing thing requires water. This is a water world. And how it works out is that disease really is able to grow when our water is not pH balanced in our body. Our bodies are actually on 24-hour clocks. We really should be working to keep the acidity level of our bodies at a balanced pH during this time to fight illness. And this is a healthcare concern as well, because I truly believe in my own personal health practices, and how I will encourage other Canadians to go forward, that preventative medicine is the best cure. And living a more holistic lifestyle, living a more organic lifestyle is something we're really going to have to do here. Because we're going to move back to the water here, as I only have another minute left. Canada's weather has a lot to do with the oceans from the Canadian Rockies. The oceans that the Canadian Rockies actually feed circulate all around Canada. And these waters, part of these waters flow into the Earth's thermal-Hawaiian circulatory system. It's already predicted that this system is going to collapse. And when this system collapses, Canadians will have to pay. And we must prepare for this. It might be 10 years down the road. It might be 5 years down the road. But there was a document done by the U.S. Security Council back in 2003 called Abrupt Climate Change. The worst case scenarios. You can find it online. Just Google Abrupt Climate Change downloadable PDF, and the U.S. Security Council featured that. But look, it's coming up in 15 minutes. I have to roll. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.